It was almost midnight. Sally Truitt had just gotten on the subway train at 50th Street after visiting her mother. "Don't worry," Sally had told her. "The subway is safe. There is a policeman on duty." But that night she didn't see one. Except for her, the subway car was empty. At 42nd Street, three tough-looking men got on. Two of them were holding up the third, who looked drunk. His head rolled from side to side and his legs refused to work. When they got him seated between them, his head came to rest on one of their shoulders. Sally thought he was staring at her. She buried her head in a book and tried not to notice. At 28th Street, one of the men stood up. "Take it easy, Jim," he said to the man in the middle, and he got off. At 23rd Street, Jim's other friend stood up. "You'll be fine," he said, and he got off. Now the only ones left in the car were Jim and Sally. Just then the train went around a sharp curve, and Jim pitched onto the floor at Sally's feet. When she looked down at him, she saw a trickle of blood on the side of his head and, just above it, a bullet hole. Sally's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled as she clutched her book tighter. The train rattled through the dark tunnel, the sound echoing in the empty car. She glanced around, desperately hoping to see someone, anyone who could help. But there was no one. Jim's body lay unnervingly still at her feet, the blood slowly pooling on the floor. Sally felt a wave of panic rising. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers barely managing to unlock it. As she dialed 911, she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "911, what's your emergency?" The operator's voice crackled through the speaker. There's a man on the subway. He's been shot. I need help," Sally stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Which station are you at?" the operator asked. Sally's mind went blank for a moment. 23rd Street, she finally managed to say, her eyes darting to the sign on the platform outside. "Help is on the way. Stay on the line," the operator instructed. Sally nodded, though the operator couldn't see her. She crouched down, careful not to touch the blood, and looked at Jim's face. His eyes were open but lifeless. The train slowed as it approached the next station. Sally prayed someone would get on. The doors opened with a mechanical hiss, but the platform was deserted. She felt a sinking dread in her stomach as the doors closed again and the train continued its journey. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper. Her eyes darted around, but there was no one. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. She looked down at the deceased man. His eyes were open, looking straight at her. Her blood ran cold. She closed her eyes and then opened them again, looking down at Jim, but his body hadn't moved. The lights flickered and Sally's heart raced. She could feel the oppressive weight of fear pressing down on her. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of disembodied voices echoing through the car. "What are you waiting for?" the voice said. She clamped her hands over her ears, trying to shut out the voice, but it only grew louder, more frantic. The train sped through the tunnel, the lights flickering erratically. In a moment of clarity, Sally remembered the urban legend her mother had told her as a child. Stories of the lost souls of the subway, people who had disappeared mysteriously, their spirits doomed to haunt the tunnels forever. "No," she whispered to herself, "this can't be real." But the whispers persisted, growing more desperate. As the train pulled into the next station, the lights went out completely. Sally was plunged into darkness, the whispers surrounding her. She felt a cold hand brush against her cheek and screamed, dropping her phone. The screen shattered on the floor, casting a dim glow that barely illuminated the car. "Sally." The whisper was right in her ear now. The train shuddered to a halt. The doors opened and Sally saw the faint outline of figures standing on the platform, their eyes glowing in the dark. They were watching her, waiting. She bolted from the car, her heart pounding, the whispers following her into the night. As she ran up the stairs and out of the station, she vowed never to take the subway again. But even as she emerged into the city streets, she could still hear them, faint and distant, calling her name. The lost souls of the subway had found her, and they would never let her go.